So I finally got to review the GOP debate from a couple of weeks ago. Didn't get to it as quickly as I would have hoped because we were on vacation, but I did sit down and listen to the debate in its entirety. I prepped some notes for you guys, just some general thoughts, going to give out a couple of shout outs to some candidates that answered specific questions better than everybody else, and then I'll give who I thought won the debate overall. But to hop into it, just some general thoughts and reactions. There was a question that was asked that I didn't really like, not because the question wasn't good, but because I thought it needed to be more specific and there needed to be more context. The panel of candidates were asked to raise their hand if they would support Trump as the nominee if he was convicted of a crime, and I think 4 or 5 different candidates raised their hand. The reason why I didn't like this question is because, again, it lacks some context. I think it does matter which crime Trump is charged on. If he is charged on the classified documents case, I think that's a little bit different than some of these other indictments. I think that one is a little more foolproof. It holds more water. And I think the GOP should be very careful on how they handle Trump if he is convicted. Me personally, I am very skittish on voting for Trump if he is in jail. And you might say that it's not fair or that he shouldn't be charged or convicted. I understand, but at the same time, I think that the GOP and then we as Republicans, people who typically vote Republican, can do a little bit better when it comes to the type of candidate that we nominate. Specifically, somebody who can handle those situations in a better manner and won't make the same mistakes that Trump makes, because Trump continues to try to bury himself in certain situations. So that was one thing that I didn't really like. I wish somebody would have interjected. One of the candidates would have interjected and added some context to the question. That didn't happen, unfortunately. So that was one takeaway. Another takeaway that I had is I was kind of surprised at how hard Chris Christie and Mike Pence were going after Vivek. And it seems that the panel overall, they are kind of underestimating him, to which I'm surprised, because if you think back to the Trump presidency or the campaign leading up to the Trump presidency, Vivek is like Trump in a number of different ways, in that he doesn't have a lot of political experience. He is kind of an outsider. He's not a politician. He has not been a lifelong politician. And Trump was able to run on that and win. To think that Vivek couldn't somehow do the same thing, I think is kind of foolish. I think that both Pence and Christie are underestimating him, and they went out of their way to bash him a number of different times. I think they should be very, very careful, because that is the same kind of attitude that the Republicans had towards Trump, and it came back to bite them in the rear end. So those are just a couple general takeaways. Some more specific things, I'm going to hand out a couple of small victories. What you will notice is that a lot of these candidates, their ideas and their thoughts on different issues, they overlap in terms of, let's say, the border, for example. All of the people on the panel, all of the candidates agree that something needs to be done on the southern border. All of them agree that it would be their responsibility as president to stop the illegal immigration, stop the drugs, stop all of the issues that are created by illegal immigration. So that's kind of a given, right? But you really have to pay attention in circumstances where generally the answers are going to be the same. How you word a response could be the difference between you winning a debate and you losing the debate. And I think that when it came to a particular set of issues, a couple different issues, there are a handful of candidates that answered it in a particular way that set them apart from what the other candidates were saying, because generally speaking, they all kind of had the same concept of what they needed to do. So when it came to the border crisis, again, everybody's answer was similar, but I think Chris Christie really summarized it the best. He did make mention that legal immigrants, and I think this is a very good way of answering this question, legal immigrants, people that are waiting in line to assimilate and legally enter the country in a proper manner, they should have the priority. We should not put their immigration on hold because we're dealing with a border crisis and allowing all of the illegal immigrants in. People who choose to follow the law, people who choose to do things correctly, they should get the priority. That is a nuanced answer. It was a better answer. It was probably better than anyone else's answer on the panel, and so for that he gets credit. When it comes to the climate, I thought Haley and Scott both had really good answers. What Haley said is that she pointed out China and India specifically. If we're going to do something about the climate, that's who we're going to have to talk to. And pointing out that it's not the US, right? You would think in some ways that the US was primarily responsible for climate change based upon our reactions to climate change and how concerned people are, but that's not actually the case. We should be looking at China, we should be looking at India and asking them, demanding that they do their part. And Scott kind of followed up on this by saying, I have it written down here, I don't think this is a direct quote, but I have it written down basically the general concept. Don't kill our economy. This is Senator Scott. Don't kill our economy to negate pollution at the hands of other countries. We're not going to grind our country, our economy to a halt just so we can fix the problems that are being created by other countries. We're not going to stop our own energy production. We're not going to negate our ability to become energy independent because we're trying to fix the problems that are being created, the climate change problems that are being created by other countries. I think that is a great way to put it. It's a great answer. It does shed some light on the real problem. I truly believe that some people think America is solely responsible for climate change, and that's why they're so radical in what they think we should do about climate change. The reality is it's these other countries that are doing most of the damage, and we shouldn't stop what we're doing here in America to make up for that. So I thought those were good answers on both of their behalves. When it comes to education, DeSantis, I think, was the winner when it comes to answering questions regarding education. There were examples that he could point to. He did keep the schools open in Florida. How he handled COVID, how he's handled the fight against indoctrination. Keeping the focus on education and not indoctrination was something similar to what he said. And I think he gets credit for that because he can point to specific examples of things that he has done to negate the negative effects of COVID and also enhance the education of the children in Florida. Now, as for the winners and the losers, I don't really think there was any specific losers. I do think that there are a handful of candidates that came out on top. I'm kind of torn between Vivek and Pence in terms of second and third. Here's the thing about Vivek. When he is out on his own and he is speaking on all of these podcasts and he is out speaking to large groups of people, he does really, really well. And the fact that he is new, the fact that he is not a politician, the fact that he is younger, significantly younger than everybody else, I think helps him in a number of ways. But as Pence and Christie both pointed out, he does not have the experience, which is okay if you have a clear vision, which I do think Vivek has a clear vision. But if you put him on a panel with other career-long politicians, and they start to stack up examples of things they specifically did, he kind of falls behind. When it comes to, because Christie and Pence and DeSantis, when they were asked questions, they can say, when I was the governor of Indiana, when I was the governor of New Jersey, DeSantis is the governor of Florida, this is what we did. This is how we fought against these things. When I was presented with this bill, here's the action that I took, and here were the repercussions of that. Here were the positive impacts of that. And they can list off a number of examples. Vivek cannot do that. And so those examples eventually start to pile up, and he falls behind a little bit because he hasn't been put in a position where he's made those decisions. He doesn't have all of those examples in his repertoire to throw out there and show the American people that he can handle specific situations. So I think that hurt him a little bit. Again, I don't think he did anything to lose the debate, but when it comes to presenting examples of how he can handle certain situations, it caused him to fall behind a little bit. I would probably give him third place. Mike Pence, I would probably give second. I don't think he underperformed. I also don't think he exceeded expectations. I guess you would say maybe he's the most consistent. He did very well in his debate. Think back to when he debated Kamala Harris for the 2020 election, did very well in that. I think Pence is very consistent. But again, he didn't really say anything that stuck out to me. He didn't underperform, but I think because he has those examples, he was able to surpass Vivek in certain circumstances. So I'm going to go ahead and give him second, probably. First, I think there is a fair gap between first, second, and third. It's got to be DeSantis. And the biggest thing that I wrote down is that out of all the candidates present, he had the most examples of how he has handled specific situations. When it comes to COVID, when it comes to education and natural disasters, when it comes to crime, he had examples of actions that he took personally as the governor of Florida and how it impacted Florida in a positive manner. Pence was able to do the same thing. Christie was also able to give some examples, but neither of them were able to give as many examples as DeSantis was. So I think that he came out on top. He set himself apart. He's dealing with another natural disaster right now in Florida with the recent hurricane that went through. He again has a chance to demonstrate live his ability to handle these things, especially as Biden has failed to handle the Maui tragedy. He has set himself apart because of how he has handled all of these circumstances. And to me, I think he came out on top.